Are you not making money from your podcast, but you are heavily focused on making money from your podcast? Is it getting super frustrating to you and you're just like, I have to give up? Well, today we are talking with Anthony, and he's sharing with us why we should not be focusing on monetization out the gate and why we should focus on growing, connecting, and serving. And in doing so, you know what happens? We make more money. This conversation completely blew my mind. I love when I get to talk to mentors that didn't even know they were a mentor on my podcast journey. And today we are talking about the art of nurturing relationships, building our audience, and as a side effect of that audience growth, we're going to talk about making more money and how to create that content that your audience craves. So are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Cure for Pod Fade. I am so excited you found your way here because that means you know how powerful podcasting can be. You are ready to build a legacy with your unique story, your message, and your offer, but you're getting a little overwhelmed. You're feeling frustrated, you're feeling stuck. You just don't know how to grow your show, find a new audience, and make some money. Podcasting can be the ticket to the life of your dreams, and it doesn't have to be as hard as you think. We're talking about all the ingredients it takes to be a successful, profitable podcaster without that icky overwhelm, because you are too magical to join the 85% plus club that pod fades away. I'm your host, Jen Dragonette, so let's make podcasting easy peasy lemon squeezy. I'm excited today because unofficially, well, this is our first official meeting, but you've been my mentor for years and just haven't known about it. You've actually been on my list of people to reach out to. So thanks for reaching out to me when I wasn't brave enough. But welcome to the podcast, Anthony. You've done so much. Like your book, one of your books that you've penned, like under a different pen name, Podcasting for Beginners and Podcast Marketing. It was my Bible in the beginning. And you have a podcast, Get More Listeners. And you also have a book out that's Why 75% of Podcasts Fail. And what more could the Cure for Pod Fade want? So welcome.
No, it's good to be here. I was going to say, Jen, I always see your stuff and I find it strange how this is the first time where we're getting on a call with each other, but there's no the better time for it either, right? So this is good. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, and that's the power of podcasting. So outside of everything that we see in the world, like make money with your podcast, do this. But it's really this powerful connection. And we were just talking about that make money thing. And I think that you have a really interesting point of view because when we were talking, you said something to me that I was like, let's dig deeper. And that was most podcasts shouldn't monetize out the gate. So I'm just going to start it with like, I got to know more about, like, I was like, pause, let's get started. Why shouldn't podcasters be trying to monetize out the gate?
No, I love that. That's a great question. You know what? And that's something I've been thinking about for a while now. So the last couple of weeks for me, you know, we've got a coaching business as well as a publishing company, all about podcasting, all about helping podcasters grow. And whenever we get on discovery calls and sales calls and all that kind of good stuff, it always comes up, right? What's the goal? What do you want to do? And everyone's goal is always to monetize right away, right? Whether they've got an audience of 50 listeners per episode or 1,000 listeners per episode, it's always how the hell do I monetize? Even when they've got zero, it's always how the hell do I monetize? And I've been thinking about this for quite some time and it got me thinking, should the goal of a podcaster who's still growing, still building their audience in that building phase, should it be to monetize their podcast right away? And does having that goal affect the quality of content that they can create? Does it get in the way of them producing a better quality podcast that will actually lead to faster growth? And here's the funny part, this is the part there is, when they get the faster growth, they can actually then monetize their podcast. So it got me thinking, and my conclusion was like, I don't believe that if you're a podcaster or you're a business owner or expert, I believe the podcast should be used when you're first getting started building your audience. And I'll say building your audience until you're around like 500 to 1,000 downloads per month. Per episode rather. And that's a very high number. And I want the standards to be very high for that reason. I don't believe that should be the goal, which is to monetize before then. And the reason why I say this is because, again, you're kind of essentially optimizing your podcast for the wrong things. When you're building an audience, it's about service, it's about giving. How can I give more? How can I add value to my audience? Not how can I take value from my audience? You know, so that's kind of why it got me thinking in that way. And yeah.
There's a few things that you said that eventually, like, I'm going to come back to, but one of them was in the beginning, not to focus on making money. Okay, great. Well, I'm a podcaster. I don't have time. So I've just hired out a producer that's now coming out of my budget. As a producer, I hear this all the time. If we're not going to monetize, we're going to build. You did say the sneaky thing in there that was as you build and you grow trust, it's naturally going to come instead of having to go after that.
Absolutely.
The other thing that you mentioned is the quality. And I see this all the time because I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of audio, and it becomes like a bad sales pitch that you used to listen to at 2 a.m., you know, on those selling networks. That's kind of what I feel like a lot of podcasts turn into, and those tend to disappear.
100%. You're totally right. And I think you see it everywhere, right? Everything's so commercialized. People go to podcasts to feel like they're hanging out with a friend, learning whilst being entertained. And when the priority is just a sales pitch, and again, trust me, I love money. I love money. I absolutely love money. I love making money. I'm all about it. I'm game for it, right? But again, it's just a mindset shift. It's really thinking, what is the priority for us right now? And what is our strategy? If we do want to monetize, what's the best way of getting there? And oftentimes you dig in and you realize it's just building an audience, building trust, and then monetizing. But if you're still in that building an audience and building trust phase, and you've probably already tried to monetize, and if people aren't buying your stuff and aren't reacting, it's probably an indicator you shouldn't be trying to sell right off the bat.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier was the 500 to 1,000 listeners. And I think this is another one of the misconceptions in this industry is that a lot of people think sponsors, okay, you need hundreds of thousands of downloads. And you actually said the words 500 to 1,000 listens per episode is really good. And I think that this is also part of this monetization conversation because growing an audience to 500 to 1,000 listeners, it's a challenge. It can be a challenge, especially if you're focused just on money. But I also want to say for those listeners out there that you're stuck at that 100, 120, 30 listeners, you still are actually in the game in podcast world because again, 1,000 listeners an episode is a lot. I have a show that's a top 0.01% and they're like 2,500 to 3,000 an episode.
100%.
So I wanted to reiterate that because you're mentioning monetizing, growing your audience, but we're not talking about growing your audience to hundreds of thousands of downloads an episode.
Yeah,
but you have to focus on getting there, getting to that 500.
100%. Let's get the first 500, first 5,000 true fans, and then build from that. And I think, is that a challenge? Hell yes, it's a challenge. Is it going to be difficult? Hell yes, it's going to be difficult. Are you going to have days where you think, what the hell am I doing? This is absolutely not worth it. Hell yes, you're going to have those days. I have those days, most days. Right? But again, it's sticking with the principle that if we know, and I think it's important to set your standards, right? For example, this is something that really shocked me more recently. So part of our marketing strategy is using cold emails, right? So we write copy, we send it out to podcasts and we give them a pitch to potentially work with us as a client. And I remember a few months back, I was high as a horse, absolutely amazing. So I was getting book calls consistently. And I remember we're sending around 120 emails per day. And I was really chuffed and I was really happy with myself. And then I spoke to one of my very close friends, just also using cold emails for a different business. And I remember he was saying, yeah, dude, I'm getting like 10, 15 calls booked per day. And I was like, what? I'm like barely getting 1 or 2 booked a day. Like, and I'm still happy about like, how are you getting 10? He goes, well, how many emails are you sending? And I was like, yeah, we're sending around 100. And he goes, well, like 100, like like, every hour? And I was like, no, like 100 a day. Had a massive smile on my face, super pumped up. And he goes, dude, we're sending 10,000 a day. And I was like, what? That completely broke my frame. And one, I was embarrassed. Two, I felt like, how the hell have I been here and not seeing this so clearly? And when he said that, it made me realize, oh, wow, if I'm trying to grow and mature, my standards need to level up, right? So from that point, we started sending 500. And what happened? Because my standard increased, we started getting 1 to 4 calls booked per day, right? And that was like transformative for our business in a drastic way. What the hell does that have to do with podcasting? When we say 500 downloads per episode, that sounds intimidating. However, when you have that standard for yourself, it pushes you to explore how to grow the show primarily, then monetize, right? Again, it forces you to raise your standards of what good quality content is and the strategies you're using to get from where you are right now to where you're going. It forces you to evaluate every single action you're taking to ask yourself, is this taking me close to my goal, or am I repeating the same things over and over again that isn't quite working? But when you have the monetization as part of that, and that being the focus, you're just running around in circles. You're not focused on the right things. You're focused on how do I, again, take money and how do I extract value from my audience? Again, nothing wrong with that, but that's a different game you're trying to play.
Yeah. I love that perspective shift. And there's so many things that come up as you're saying that. Is like, okay, first off, sending 120 emails a day. Like, to me, I'm the opposite. Like, I was with you. I'm like 120 emails a day. Like, my whole email list is only like 500 total. Sending that many every day would be a lot. So we have to, again, go back to that piece. He's sending that many. And yes, they're cold emails, but there's that work piece behind it. There's got to be something that you have created to get them to open it. It's just like a podcast episode. What are you putting out that is getting that person to open it and to actually read, to get on the thing? Is that's value first, even though it's a cold email. The person that's listening to your podcast is your quote unquote cold email. If I'm understanding how you're explaining this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that I was on the same path.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
this
for
is
sure,
awesome.
for sure. And that's the thing, right? I think having that perspective shift, and again, going back to kind of what we spoke about like the monetizing first, is like, what we trying to do here. Not everyone is going to be fortunate enough to where they're making enough money where they don't have to monetize the podcast straight away. But I'd really, really encourage you to evaluate, like, what game are you trying to play? Because podcasting, to me, is more of a marketing tool to build awareness, to build trust, and to monetize when it's needed. Again, we help our clients monetize in different ways, and that's totally cool and that's totally fine. But I would always encourage them to really think, what are we prioritizing right now? Do I absolutely need the podcast to make money, or is it something that would feel nice? And oftentimes it's more so a feeling of like, well, I'm doing all this effort, I'm putting all this time, I'm putting all this energy into the show. I want to get more of an ROI, right? But that's a trick. It's a trick that happens because it's a facade. When you're building trust, can you see trust? Can you taste trust?
Kind of. No.
No? You can't see trust.
That's a good cup of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Can you touch trust? No. So it's not this material thing that you're building, right? But it absolutely is there, and it's in the people who are giving their trust to you. And when those people give their trust to you, it's about building and nurturing that, and when you haven't started having this pitch fest, so here's the issue. If you have, let's say, 50 listeners and you start pitching every single episode, after 4 or 5, people who are going to buy are going to buy. They would have bought already. So now you're left with everyone else who doesn't really want to buy. And then by you pitching more and more, you're then putting those people off. And that's already a small bracket of people listening. Right? So what happens then? Maybe people start dropping off. And now you're actually at a worse spot. Whereas if you're at 500 downloads or listeners per episode and you're pitching to that, there's a larger pool who will buy, right? But you're also growing and building momentum, right? You're recycling some of the listeners who were kind of in there, and you can monetize sustainably and consistently. When there's a smaller pool, you don't have that privilege, I would say. That's kind of what I'll take.
So with the smaller audience, even if when you get to the bigger audience, if we're not pitching something every time, because you hear this all the time. I mean, it's something I say to people, like, have some sort of call to action at the end of your episode or inside your episode so that you can connect on a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still recommend that we can put that call to action to, maybe it's a call, maybe it's something free, like maybe it's not, do you recommend that? Or are you recommending pouring value in? And when they like, I have to know more about this, because to me, I'm like, oh, this is great. But I still want to create that deeper level, which again, deeper connections, conversations, cash is what one of my clients said. And I'm like, okay, so then it kind of goes down that rabbit hole. But if I'm not sharing something in every episode, how do I create those deeper connections?
No, I love that. And that's a great question. I think for us, what we do is we provide value some more. The next step is, hey, get a free podcast audit and also get a copy of our book, right? That's our little touch point of additional value. And then what we do, we have their email, we give them the personalized audit, and then we start a conversation back and forth. Hey, what did you like about the podcast? What do you believe is missing? Is there anything else we can help you out with? Right? And that's how we do the nurturing of those deeper relationships. When you're growing more and more, then you can share about, joining you on Facebook or joining you on socials, and that's completely fine as well. But again, the tricky part is if you're, let's say, below 50 downloads, 200 downloads, 100 downloads per episode, and you only have one or two people in your community who aren't necessarily engaging as much, then it doesn't have the same value. And that's just the honest truth. And you're much better nurturing them in a one-to-one basis at the beginning when it's relatively small than you are trying to force them to follow you on Instagram. Like, again, if they want to, then that's great and they'll find you. But making sure they do follow you on Instagram, you reach out. Hey, I saw you followed me. Where did you find me from? How are you finding the podcast? I would love that. Are you free for a quick 15-minute call? I would love to just get some thoughts and share some value if I possibly can. That's what we do. But again, that's a one-on-one basis because the audience needs to grow more and more and more and allow that to naturally happen.
Okay, we can just mic drop right there, because that's what it's all about, is when you have a small audience, it's one-on-one, but we're force-fed. Social media is a whole nother ball game for me. I'm mostly off of social media right now because I had to take a break, but we're force-fed this automate. It's just like the monetization out the gate. It's like we're taught to monetize and automate out the gate. And I'm like, that's not how you grow. That's why I love this platform, because we're having a two-way conversation. We're in somebody's ear, and it's an intimate conversation. Surprisingly,
100%.
a lot of you are in the shower. So hello, our shower listeners. I love that. But that's one of the myths I think is out there that I'm so glad you brought that point up, is you have the time when you're a baby, quote unquote,
100%.
in business to do the one-on-one. And that's where you get the market research. Like
100%.
It's not bad.
No, it's not a bad thing at all. And I think, I don't know where some of these ideas come from, because I've been in the space for quite some time, and I'm honestly, I sometimes think to myself, okay, where are some of these ideas coming from? And it's always very tricky to pinpoint, because it feels like I'm in this space and I see the podcasts all day, every day. And we've got, worked over currently now when Academy, we've got like these 80 plus podcasts in our Academy, etc. So I'm like, I don't know where these ideas are coming from. If you're listening right now, please let Jen know or reach out to me and let me know. Cause I would love to know where the source is coming from, because I would go as far to say that the number one reasons why most podcasters stop, quit, and pod fade is because they're trying to monetize straight away. When you try to monetize straight away, your goals aren't in alignment with growing an audience, building trust. It's the complete opposite. When you think about Alex Hormozy or big people in the space, they provide value consistently and then they ask for a return, but they build that audience from the ground up. And that's how that trust is built, because you're being open, you're being transparent. And then when the time comes, you will know. And again, a litmus test is if you've tried to monetize your podcast already and it's not working, it's probably not the right time to try to monetize your podcast. The market has spoken. You've shot your shot, and they've said, "Hey, you do one. We're not we're not interested right now anyway." So you reevaluate, you think, you plan on growth and value, and then you give it another shot. Maybe when you've got a couple more hundred listeners per episode, and then you see how they react. And if you get 1 or 2 buys, boom, there you go. That's your answer. And then again, you evaluate, how do I provide more value? How do I build my audience even more? And then you give it another shot. But if you keep shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting and no one's responding, the market has answered. And I'll tell you this, one of my very first mentors when I got into podcasting and marketing and publishing, he said to me this, right? I go to him, dude, I've got this amazing idea for a book. We called it Every Podcaster's Biggest Hurdle, one of our biggest fails ever, right? It was an epic fail. We spent thousands on this book, months of our lives, me and my business partner, Tygo Shea, and we launched this book. And I remember waiting there, like I still was like a little kid on Christmas Day, my feet kicking up, so excited. Opened up our dashboard, refreshed it again, 0. And I was like, no, come on, lad. This is my internet. It's playing up. Turn on 3G, change the data, refresh it again, 0. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And he goes to me, dude, you've got this book. It's a great idea, but it's just an idea. You had an idea and you thought it was good, whether that's a pitch or this book or whatever that might be. And you gave that idea to the market. And the market threw that back in your face and said, it's a shit book. I don't know if I'm, so I apologize, but it's essentially a crap book. That's what the market said. There's no emotions attached to that, right? It's just data as a data point. And it's the same way, for example, if you have a child and you might know things are good for it, again, you've got value to share. You want to build that audience. You've got a child, and your child, even though vegetables are great for them, even though they just have their veggies and their beans, if they don't want their veggies and beans and try to force them to have their veggies and beans, it's going to make them rebel. That's the same with your listeners. If you try to monetize again and again and again and nothing's happening and the market isn't reacting, they're telling you, hey, it's either not the right time or the product isn't the right thing that we want. So focus on growth, building that audience more, knowing your audience, nurturing those relationships, and then thinking about monetizing when the time is right.
Ooh. And that goes back to have those one-on-one connections, like the fact that you do audits. We do audits here too. And I think that I get so much market research from there, especially like you said, we're shooting all the different directions and everyone's like, no. And I had no idea that book was, I'm like, I'm sorry. I wrote one book and I put it out. It did reach bestseller. We did hit bestseller. But I couldn't imagine, like it's a deeper level. I think the fact that you've written so many books, like podcasting is vulnerable, and then writing a book is like a whole new level of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is about the words on a page that's into a book form. But I want to go back up a second for a minute of like where people are finding these ideas that we have to shoot all these shots. We have to make all these things work. We have to do all the tactics. We have to show up and like on every platform to grow. When in reality, I think that what I'm hearing from you is pulling all these pieces back to make it simple, like streamline, talk to your people, give value. Yes. I personally do think that at some point that profits should be some part of your strategy. I think that for me, like, I think profit should be part of your strategy from the beginning, but I don't think in the sense of monetizing your show. I think it should be part of that my goal of my podcast is to give value, earn the money so I can give more value.
Absolutely. And I guess I want to make this very extremely clear. I'm a capitalist. I love making money. I love business. My podcast right now, the main goal in the short term is to build my audience and provide value. Don't get it twisted, right? The overarching goal is to make profit and to turn it into a front-end marketing machine that nurtures my listeners, that builds their trust and allows them to take the next step to work with our company. That's in the back of my mind. After working with tons of podcasters, have realized the best way to achieve that goal at a faster rate and make it more sustainable is actually by building the audience, building their trust, and then monetizing. So it's 100% part of my strategy. And I'm not doing this just to give value. I'm not doing it for fun. I'm not doing it just to give value. All that stuff is great. But again, I of course want to make money as well. It's just the time horizon. I'm trying to be as patient with that as I possibly can. That's what I would say. So just wanted to clarify that, because I don't want anyone to get the wrong person thinking like, oh, he's trying to be a saint. No. Give value, but also get some value as well. Just think about the timing.
That's what I wanted to get back. I was like, I know that it's not just because we're not saying don't monetize your podcast. We're saying don't focus on just that. Don't be like, oh my goodness, I've got this new book out. Let me tell you about my book. All right. My book is this many pages. It's this. And it's, like, this is a great book. I highly recommend it. Again, it helped me learn a lot. But what I'm hearing and what I want to just keep saying back is that we're not saying you're not going to make money. We're saying don't focus on that. Focus on getting to know your people. Focus on gaining that know, like, and trust. But he's still thinking money, guys. Let's not.
I'm thinking money.
Let's not say we're doing this for free, because podcasting is a lot of work. And that being said is, okay, we're shifting the focus. We're serving our audience. We're going up this path, and podcasting does feel like an uphill path. Even as a person in the industry, growing other shows, growing my own show, it does feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. And I know one of the things I always like to ask, like, what's one question that you wish that people had asked you? And it's, you answered, what's the hardest part of what you do?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. And you know what? I'm going to think, because I'm going to think about it, because I could say so many different things, but if I had to be true, it would be the hardest part of what I do. It's so difficult because I love what I do, and I wouldn't really change it for a thing, because it's fucking is the best. And I'm extremely, extremely, extremely grateful. It's a lot of fucking hard work and a lot of sacrifices. I'll probably say that. I think the hardest part of what I do or what we all do as entrepreneurs, and for myself personally, is kind of like, you're actively choosing to have an extremely stressful and pressurized life. That's probably the hardest part, seeing friends and family have a normal life, and, for the short term, knowing you have to make these sacrifices, knowing that sometimes your business pulls you in to sacrifice so much, knowing that you're working hard and going through all the stress and pain to provide a better life for yourself, for your loved ones, for your family. But knowing that within doing that, you're also at certain stages of your journey, almost like those things crumbling because you can't give it as much time or as much energy. And that's probably the most painful thing in the world, when you're working hard to serve and love for the people you love, and of course for yourself. But in doing so, in that pursuit of that, in that obsession, you're completely lost at times. You kind of start losing yourself. You kind of start thinking in pretty nutty ways. Should I completely cut everyone off? And should I just go black? And should I have to speak to anyone? Should I just work 25 hours a day? And that insanity. And then the consequence of that, of like, maybe not being as close with certain friends you used to have, and not being closer with your family for a period of time, almost feeling like whilst your business is growing and thriving, or maybe whilst your business is not growing and thriving, everything else around you that you've sacrificed is also crumbling in the background. You have to just stay strong and stay firm with your faith. That, I would say, is always a fucking challenge. It's it fucks with your head. It's crazy. It messes with you. That's me being honest, yeah.
I know, juicy, right? Well, I am going to leave us right there for this week, but come back next week, because we are digging even deeper into creating connections with our audience, building a podcast that attracts people in, where we don't always have to focus on monetization, because serving and putting out content that makes us incredibly happy, actually in return is improving our ROI in our bank account. So I will see you for part 2 next week.